Hi guys, welcome back to my channel, True Crime Matters, where we talk about and analyze everything true crime. Now, this is part 2 of a series in the recent Scott Peterson declaration. If you are following along, you know that we are deep diving into the latest developments in the Scott Peterson case. If you're just jumping in, please be sure to go back and watch part 1 first. I'm going to link that down below because we're going through Scott Peterson's own written declaration from the amended petition just filed by the LA Innocence Project, late April of 2025. In the last episode, I recapped the explosive new evidence that's come out, including claims of withheld evidence and a burglary that may rewrite the case timeline entirely. So today we're picking up right where we left off, and I'll be reading more of Scott Peterson's personal account of what happened during the critical days surrounding Laci's disappearance. This is really the first time we've heard this much detail from him, so you really do not want to miss anything he says. Now let's pick up right here in a section he calls Pickup Truck. When the police impounded my truck on December 26th, I had a large cardboard box of rain gauges that were promotional giveaways in my Green Lee toolbox. I had forgotten the box was there until after my arrest when I saw the photos the police took. And he's included a photo of the inside of that toolbox. Now, this isn't like a little toolbox. This is a large storage chest. It's about 4 feet by 2 feet by 2 feet. He had it in like the back of his pickup truck towards the driver's area. Now, this police photo shows the inside of the tool chest. And to the left, we see a pair of brown dress shoes and a pair of white and black golfing shoes and a pair of like rain boots or fishing type deck boot. Underneath the shoes, we see what looks like jumper cables, but then to the right is a large box that looks to be taking up nearly half of the entire size of this whole chest. And Scott writes, the police removed the cardboard box of rain gauges from the toolbox and failed to book it into evidence. Detective Grogan testified that he had no idea what happened to the box. The prosecution told the jury that I put my wife's dead body in the toolbox in the back of my truck and showed them photos of a demonstration they conducted with a pregnant woman from their office. Pictured below are photos the jury was shown demonstrating that a pregnant woman could fit inside the toolbox. And there's a photo here of a woman, I'm assuming about the same size as Laci, so probably about 5'1", next to and actually scrunched up inside of this chest. But I guess the point that Peterson is making, and the only trouble is it looks like there's nothing else in there with her. So the 3 pairs of shoes and, these boots and the jumper cables and this large box that was really taking up the whole right side of the tool chest is really not there. It was all removed for this demonstration photo that the prosecution showed the jury. And Scott continues, I absolutely did not harm my wife and son, nor did I put her body into my truck, nor is there any evidence to support that ill-conceived theory. There was no sign of Laci's blood, tissue, hair, or any biological evidence found inside the toolbox or anywhere else in the truck, and that is because I had nothing to do with this crime. When Detective Grogan admitted on the stand that there was a large cardboard box full of work materials found inside the toolbox in my truck, which the police admitted they failed to collect as evidence or document in a report, the prosecution pivoted to a new theory and said I put my wife's body under some patio umbrellas that were in the back of the truck and that I covered her with a blue tarp. Again, there was no forensic evidence or any other evidence supporting that theory. Nothing was found on the blue tarp, the umbrellas, or any of the many other items that were collected from my truck and tested. That is because Laci was never in the back of my truck because I had nothing to do with her disappearance or murder. One thing the jury did not hear is that during the execution of the December 26th search warrant, scent dog handler Eloise Anderson already knew the police believed I killed Laci and put her body into my truck. So she asked Detective Handy if he wanted her to put her cadaver dog into my truck to search for evidence of a cadaver. And Detective Handy said no. It is difficult to fathom why the police would not put the cadaver dog into the back of my truck if they believe I transported my wife's dead body in my truck. And there's some testimony here backing up how the police indeed declined having a cadaver dog check the tool chest of his truck. He continues, I also learned after I was arrested that the police searched our home using a cadaver dog on December 26th, and there were no alerts inside our house. The photo below was taken inside our house while the cadaver dog was looking for but not finding any evidence that I killed Laci. Now, this next section he calls sturgeon. The December 26th search warrant affidavit also stated that another thing police found suspicious was that I could not tell the police what kind of fish I had gone fishing for that day, December 24th, 2002. I have fished all my life. I enjoy it. When Laci and I honeymooned in Tahiti, I took along a fishing rod and fished from a kayak we rented there one day. I had never tried fishing for sturgeon before December 24th, and I wanted to try it. When the police asked me what kind of fish I was looking for that day, I described it as a, quote, prehistoric-looking fish. I could not immediately find the word sturgeon in my head. I recalled the word a few moments later, and I told the police. I also showed them my fishing boat and gear, and at no point did I ever try to hide anything about the fishing I had done earlier that day. When the search warrant was actually served on me, I read it and I saw it was asking for my fishing license, and I immediately handed it over to the police then and there. As I later told Detective Porcini and others repeatedly, I was fishing for sturgeon. With everything that was going on the day Laci turned up missing, with numerous family members, volunteers, police officers searching for Laci in and around our home, I felt a little overwhelmed and did not immediately find the word sturgeon when was first asked. And he calls this section La Loma neighborhood in Modesto. He writes, Laci and I were both involved. Do you hear my neighbors? They're outside. They're playing with their kids. I hope it doesn't bother you. It's not bothering me. So I'm just going to continue because it's kind of cute. Anyway, he writes, Laci and I were both involved in La Loma neighborhood and community affairs, but Laci was more active than I was, especially after she transitioned to a lighter work schedule. In mid-2002, Laci signed us up to be part of a neighborhood committee called the La Loma Neighborhood Committee to Stop the Encina Connection. We attended committee meetings between July and October of 2002. The committee was an organized effort to defeat a proposal to make changes to the neighborhood that would increase vehicle traffic. Laci and I spent a few weekends videotaping traffic patterns on our camcorder as part of that effort to show that the traffic was driving at dangerous speeds through the neighborhood, making it unsafe for children and pedestrians. There were a number of streets in our neighborhood that did not have sidewalks, including our street, which meant that people taking walks had to walk on the road in certain areas. I was proud of Laci for her commitment to getting engaged in making our neighborhood and community better and safer. We were aware that there was an entirely different neighborhood on the other side of Yosemite Boulevard, a few blocks south of where we lived. It was an industrial area referred to as the Airport District because it was next to the Modesto Airport. There was some lower income housing there and what seemed to be a fair amount of criminal activity. I was not paying close attention at that time, but Laci and I knew not to go south of Yosemite Boulevard when we went out to walk the dog. At the end of our street, there was a trail entrance to East La Loma Park, and we often saw people entering and exiting to the park who appeared to be homeless or transient. When Laci and I walked Mackenzie in the park, we sometimes saw transient or homeless people camping out. We would usually ask them to move along. It looked like the bike and foot traffic we saw in Covina was from people traveling to and from the airport district, using our street to get to the trail entrance at the end of Covina to get down to East Loma Park. Laci and I were getting increasingly concerned about the unsavory foot traffic we were seeing on our street from people going to and from the park. It was of such a concern to us that we discussed whether we would have purchased our home had we known about the concerning foot traffic. In the discovery I received from the prosecution after I was arrested, I learned that on September 5th and October 31st, 2002, Laci did contact the city of Modesto and asked them to close the entrance to the park located at the end of our street because there was concerning and undesirable activity taking place there. The city of Modesto either ignored or denied her requests because the park entrance was not closed to my knowledge. The emails below reflect Laci's request and were known to the police because they are included in the police investigation file. And he's included here a copy of the email. Subject line says, "Citizen request a fence adjacent to Thousand Oaks Park," from somebody named Bob Ford to Dwayne Frederick on Friday, September 5th or 6th. It's a little hard to read. 2002 at 4:45 p.m. And it reads, "Dwayne, I received a phone call this week from a Laci Peterson of 523 Covina requesting a short section of chain link fence across the short finger of Covina adjacent to 536 Covina. This is located just north of Edgebrook Drive. The complaint has to do with undesirable activity and the access to Thousand Oaks Park. The Covina right-of-way continues north, adjacent to the parcel on the west for 100 feet or so, and is dirt past 536 Covina. I don't know whether we can fence off this dead-end portion of Covina, but I thought I would ask. If this needs forwarding to another city staff person, please do so. Thank you, Bob." And then there's an additional email. Subject line says, "Covina access to Thousand Park and Trail dated November 1st." So nearly 2 months after that initial email. Again, from Bob Ford to Dwayne Frederick. And it reads, "Dwayne, Laci Peterson of 523 Covina called again this week, asking about the closing of Covina Avenue at the dirt path which leads down to the park and trail. I told her that our department wishes to keep this access." Mrs. Peterson proceeded to list the problems that she sees with the Covina Avenue Park and the trail access path. There looks to be approximately 300 feet of dirt path from the dead end of Covina down to the asphalt trail. Mrs. Peterson claims the path needs to have vegetation trimmed to improve visibility, graffiti removed, and trash picked up. She also asked about some lights along this path. I think it may help to trim the vegetation to make the path less concealed. Please ask Wally to look into the vegetation trimming, trash, and graffiti removal. Perhaps a street light at the end point of Covina would help to alleviate a nighttime visibility problem for police. Thank you, Robert Ford. So it sounds like Laci had some real legitimate concerns for her neighborhood, and she was not quiet about it, right? As Scott said. And it's people like Laci that really help keep neighborhoods, clean, safe, and really desirable. She really was a firecracker. So Scott continues, "There were a few other incidents that occurred on our street around that time. One night we were pulling into our driveway and we saw a man looking over our fence into our backyard. I asked him what he was doing and he came up with some excuse to see if our dog was okay. I started walking toward him when he circled around me and took off. I recall mentioning the incident at the time to Brent Rocha, Laci's brother, and his wife. Around that same time, Laci told me she heard what sounded like two men shouting at each other in the street in front of our house. Laci said she went out and told them to stop fighting, and that kind of behavior would not be tolerated in the neighborhood. One police report I reviewed states that our neighbor heard the encounter, and on December 30th, 2002, he told police about it. I know that Laci was intent on keeping our neighborhood safe, and she was not shy about it. About a year earlier, we caught the same guy looking over our fence and going through a trash can when it was in our driveway. As we pulled our car into the driveway, he was pulling an old bedspread out of our trash can that we had thrown away and had it in his hands. I told him to get off our property, and he walked away carrying the bedspread with him. I often saw this man riding his bike up and down our street. At one of the community meetings Laci and I attended, we met a man who lived around the corner from us named Richard Cordova. He would later become a judge. We shared with him that When we took our walks in the park and encountered homeless or transient people camping out, it made us uncomfortable. Mr. Cordova told us that he thought confronting anyone in the park was bold and possibly dangerous. After Laci was abducted, I learned that Mr. Cordova told the investigator our family hired to help search for Laci, Gary Ermoian, that he was concerned to think Laci may have been bold enough to confront someone like that on her own. Mr. Cordova, who had become a judge by the time of my trial, testified to some of this, but he was not allowed to testify fully about our conversations or his concern over the possible danger involved in Laci confronting transients in the park on her own in front of the jury because it was hearsay. And while Scott didn't include this in his declaration, I have actually pointed this out in a reel before on TikTok, so I have it accessible and I can easily share it. This was testimony at the trial by someone who lived just a few doors down from Laci and Scott, who is Judge Cordova. Here's what he said at trial when he was questioned by Scott's defense attorney, Mark Garagos. Garagos says, after your conversation with Laci Peterson, were you concerned about some things she was doing in terms of confronting people? Now, Flatiger at this point from the prosecution objected, and the judge asks for state of mind, and he continues. Did it cause you some concern about the kind of boldness that she was doing? And Cordova responded, yes. Now, it's interesting because one of the biggest reasons people discount the idea of Laci confronting burglars is because she, was 7 months pregnant and was a woman. And what woman is going to be daring enough and bold enough to go aggressively march towards shady people and yell at them? Well, here you have a neighbor who is a trustworthy judge, no less, testifying that Laci's boldness actually concerned him. And I believe Cordova warned her and Scott to be more careful in dealing with people that were, likely mentally ill or on substances because it's possible that they would retaliate against her. So this, coupled with the fact that another neighbor had already witnessed Laci break up a fight between transients in the street just weeks prior, was always enough for me personally to imagine that Laci possibly could have been bold enough to approach, people. If she had seen something shady going on across the street at her neighbor's house, especially if she had seen this man before, right? Because Stephen Todd, he's one of the men that was always walking by. Okay, this next section, Scott calls Laci's purse, clothing, jewelry, and flip-flops, and he starts with, police asked to see Laci's purse. One of the first things the police asked was for me to help locate Laci's purse, which I showed police was hanging in its usual spot in her clothes closet. Laci's purse and the items inside were handled by multiple people who were not wearing gloves, myself included. This would become important later because her sunglasses case was used as a scent article. I often cleaned Laci's glasses for her using the cleaning cloth in her purse or glasses case. And here he's included a photo of what looks like a medium-sized Louis Vuitton purse hanging up in a closet wall atop some scarves next to some belts. He continues, I told police what Laci was wearing on the night of December 23rd, which is the day before she went missing, when we went to her sister's hair salon. I told them what she wore to bed that night and what she was wearing when I left the next morning. The police did not look for the clothing or pajamas that I described Laci wearing when they searched the house on December 24th, but the blouse Laci wore to the salon that night is clearly visible in our hamper when the police photographed it on December 24th. And the blue pajama pants I told police she wore to bed that night were photographed still in the hamper during the December 26th search of our home. Sometime later, the police asked Laci's sister, Amy, what Laci was wearing when we visited the salon on December 23rd, and her description of the clothes was the same as mine. Amy searched Laci's closet and found the outfit Laci wore to the salon the night before she was abducted and showed the outfit to the police. Now, on to the next section. He calls it Laci's jewelry. Laci inherited quite a bit of jewelry from her grandmother in November of 2002. I told police Laci was wearing a diamond necklace, diamond earrings, and a diamond bezel watch she inherited from her grandmother when I left the house on the morning of December 24th. Her wedding ring was at the jeweler's being modified to incorporate some of her grandmother's diamonds. Some of the jewelry Laci inherited was not to her liking, so she sold it. Now, that kind of explains why there were pawning jewelry, right? Prior to her going missing. I know some people always question, like, if they weren't desperate for cash, why would they, all of a sudden be selling all of this jewelry? Well, you can see that for some things they were trying to list them on eBay because maybe they thought they would sell. But I guess for other items that she thought really wouldn't sell, maybe she thought nobody would like them. I guess it makes more sense to just make some money off of them that way. So Scott continues, we listed some of her grandmother's jewelry on eBay, including a Croton watch, but it did not sell. I had an account, but Laci was not as adept at using the online auction platforms, so I helped her with that. Police obtained an image of the Croton watch from our eBay account, where we had posted it for sale, and the police were able to confirm that it had not sold. I had used our camcorder to get a picture of the watch, as pictured below. And he's included this photo of the watch, which I guess since the battery was dead at the time he filmed the video, the watch is stuck at about 9:27 or so. He continues, I learned after I was arrested that police suspected I secretly sold Laci's Croton watch without her knowledge, so Detective Grogan spent a lot of time trying to find the Croton watch. I did not sell Laci's Croton watch, and there's no evidence suggesting otherwise. The police investigated and photographed the jewelry Laci had sold at Brooks Jewelers on December 10th, 2002. The photo below shows the jewelry Laci pawned at Brooks Pawn Shop that the police were able to locate and document. Now, onto Laci's flip-flops. He says, the rendering below is a depiction of the flip-flops that Laci generally kept on the back stoop. We joked about them being her, quote, Novalee flip-flops from the movie Where the Heart Is. In the movie, Novalee is abandoned in a Walmart parking lot, so she buys a cheap plastic pair of flip-flops at Walmart. We had an inside joke about them, that she could not go out in public with them. She wore them around the pool and the backyard. Our neighbor, Judge Cordova, told my defense investigator, Carl Jensen, that he had found a pair of women's sandals on the morning of December 25th on the corner of our street. Mr. Jensen asked me if any of Laci's flip-flops were missing, and I told him that her Novalee flip-flops were missing from the stoop after she was abducted. Mr. Jensen had an artist create an image to show to me pictured below. As I recall, Laci's flip-flops were a bit more orange than pictured here, but I believe the flip-flops that our neighbor Judge Cordova saw at the end of the block and pointed out to various police officers belonged to Laci. And there's this, I guess it's a painting of this sort of platform flip-flop with black sides and like a red thong piece. And the top portion of the flip-flop is like this reddish orangish color with what looks like these little white flowers on it. And he continues, not until a year after Laci was abducted did anyone investigate the sandals or flip-flops Judge Cordova found. And there's a photo of the Petersons' home, and then maybe like 100 feet away, maybe 200 feet away, at the corner of Covina, behind a yield sign on the ground, is where these flip-flops were found. Now, Scott calls this next section Laci's pregnancy. In May of 2002, after trying for some time, Laci became pregnant. She had a medical procedure as a child that caused her concern over whether she could have children. So we were relieved, happy, and excited when we learned she was pregnant. Laci took a home pregnancy test on June 9th, 2002, and we learned we were pregnant. I went with Laci to all of our OBGYN appointments. I never missed an appointment. We bought the books expecting parents typically buy. On Sunday evenings, we would sit in the living room and I would read aloud to her from the books. I bought Laci a pregnancy journal so she could record her pregnancy and preserve the experience. I remembered that after my grandfather passed, we found a book my mom had given him to write down memories in, and he had not written too many pages, but what he had written was priceless. Laci liked being pregnant and stayed active throughout her pregnancy. By all accounts, including her doctor's assessments, Laci was experiencing a healthy pregnancy. We attended Lamaze classes together and followed all of her doctor's instructions. At our appointment on October 29, 2002, Laci told the doctor she really wanted to stay at her target weight during pregnancy and asked about exercise. There is a note in Laci's medical records reflecting that conversation. The doctor did not tell her she should stop exercising or taking walks when I was present. At our appointment on November 24, 2002, Laci again talked to the doctor about her weight gain, and the doctor told her to try and have less sugar if she wanted to stay at her target weight. These conversations with her doctor are documented in her medical records and in the pregnancy journal she kept, all of which were confiscated by the police during the investigation. To my knowledge, at no time did Laci's doctor tell her she should stop exercising or could not or should not go on walks to get exercise. Laci's mother, Sharon Rocha, described Laci as headstrong when she testified at my trial. I agree with that assessment. Laci was a very headstrong person when she put her mind to something. She was determined to do everything she could to have a healthy pregnancy and stay at her target weight. On October 29, 2002, Laci wrote in her pregnancy journal that we heard the baby's heartbeat and the doctor said it sounded normal. The doctor's note from Laci's appointment on October 29, 2002 states, quote, discussed weight gain, exercise, end quote. Laci wrote in her pregnancy journal following our appointment on that day, as well as the next appointment on November 24th, 2002. And here's where he's included, I guess, police photos of what appears to be some entries in Laci's diary. There's two. And one says, October 29th, 2002. The baby has been moving a lot lately. It feels like little punches. Sometimes they're big and enough to move my hand if it's placed on my tummy. Today we had an appointment or a checkup, for a better word. Scott and I heard the baby's heart and the doctor said it sounded normal. The doctor asked if Scott had felt the baby move yet, and he excitedly replied yes. October 27th, Scott felt the baby move. And then a second entry here is dated November 24th. Quote, I am 29 weeks and feeling good. A little swollen hands and feet, and more fatigued, but overall things are going great. We had a doctor's appointment this morning and all is well. My doctor told me to slow down on the sweets if I wanted to stay at my goal weight. That was hard to take since the holidays are upon us. I guess no more nightly s'mores. Ugh, these are just so heartbreaking to read. I'm 44 now. I remember very vividly being 27 years old. And honestly, I feel like I was like a kid back then. So I read these. I remember when I was, pregnant with my first child. I think I was 31, but I still felt like a kid. And this reading through this really made me cry. I had to take a little break the first time I read it. Laci was just so young and just so excited to be a mom. And it's just truly heartbreaking. And that last line, I guess no more nightly s'mores. Just, like a little kid eating their s'mores. It's so heartbreaking. Scott continues, there are notes in Laci's medical records that she called her doctor on November 6th to let the doctor know she had gotten dizzy when she was walking. The notes indicate the doctor recommended that she not exercise, but if she does, that she should do it later in the day. Another note indicates Laci called on November 8th, and it looks like the doctor recommended self-care measures. Laci told me she had gotten dizzy when walking before breakfast a few times. She thought it was because she was not hydrated enough and that she was going to walk later in the morning after breakfast. She did not stop walking. I was at all of our OBGYN appointments with Laci and I never heard the doctor tell her to stop walking or exercising. Nor did she ever tell me that her doctor told her to stop walking, the dog, or exercising. Had I heard that, I would have been proactive about reminding her of the doctor's advice. Laci continued walking the dog in the neighborhood and also started doing prenatal yoga. Her sister, Amy Rocha, testified at my trial that she knew Laci had yoga classes on Mondays and that she was walking daily or almost daily. Sharon Rocha testified that when Laci told her about getting dizzy, she told Laci to stop walking, but she was not confident Laci would listen to her because Laci was a determined young lady. When Sharon told Laci to stop walking, Laci said, quote, "Oh, Mama, I'll be okay." Sharon admitted at trial that when she heard Laci was missing, her first thought was that she would have been walking the dog. As I told the police, Laci and I regularly walked our dog Mackenzie in the neighborhood and park throughout her pregnancy. We liked walking the dog together because there were a lot of nice older homes in the neighborhood, some with creative landscaping, and we liked looking for ideas for our own home and yard. Mackenzie sometimes pulled on the leash when we walked him, like when he saw a squirrel or other dogs, but it was manageable. Laci also walked the dog by herself about every day or every other day if I was not home and the dog needed to be walked. We varied our walking routines somewhat, but typically walked around the residential streets in our neighborhood and in East Loma Park. Laci and I traveled to Carmel to spend a few days with my parents the week before Christmas, which had become somewhat of a tradition. We had plans to spend the Christmas holiday with Laci's family in Modesto. During the trip to Carmel, I played golf with my dad while Laci and my mom walked around town and shopped and had lunch. Laci did not have trouble walking and continuing to walk for exercise throughout her pregnancy, and that would have been just days before Laci went missing. That's what was testified to, that she was walking at least a mile a day on that trip. So it kind of does make you wonder, like, was she really walking that day? Because it seems like just days before she was walking a great deal. Okay, so that is going to do it for part 2. What do you all think so far? I mean, I've been giving you my own opinions throughout, but I'd really love to hear what you all think. Has anything Scott said changed the way you see the case? We're going to continue this breakdown in part 3, where the timeline gets even more tense. There are some crucial details coming up that you will not want to miss. So if you haven't already, hit the like button, subscribe, turn on notifications so you'll be the first to know when part 3 goes live. And as always, thank you so much for watching. Be careful out there.